Life, they say, has a curious way of stripping away what we think we know, leaving us with only what truly matters. For David Miller, what truly mattered was a small, bright-eyed girl named Emily, his daughter, his universe. Every dawn brought with it the quiet, insistent hum of responsibilities, a symphony of alarm clocks, breakfast preparations, and hushed goodbyes. David moved through it all with a warm, resilient spirit, a man woven from threads of compassion and an unyielding, humble strength. He was a single father, a protector, a provider, constantly navigating the labyrinthine demands of parenting with a grace that belied the monumental weight on his shoulders. David's days were a meticulously choreographed dance of odd jobs, each step designed to ensure Emily's well-being. By morning, he'd be the diligent crossing guard outside Emily's elementary school, a reassuring smile for every child. By afternoon, a freelance handyman, fixing leaky faucets and squeaky doors for his neighbors, his hands calloused but always gentle. And by night, as the city lights twinkled like scattered diamonds, he transformed into a janitor at the imposing Ethereum Corporation, a colossal building of glass and steel that loomed over the city skyline, a monument to ambition and success. Ethereum Corporation, however, was in the midst of a seismic shift. Its board, hungry for increased profits and tighter operations, had brought in a new CEO, a force of nature named Olivia Hayes. Olivia was a titan in the corporate world, a woman whose reputation preceded her like a sharp, cold wind. She was pragmatic, relentlessly results-oriented, and driven by an ambition that burned with an almost clinical intensity. For Olivia, the world was a complex algorithm, and her job was to optimize it, eliminate inefficiencies, and drive to the bottom line with surgical precision. Emotions were variables she preferred to keep out of her equations. She saw facts, figures, and potential. She saw a company ripe for transformation, and she intended to prune it aggressively, no matter the human cost. David knew little of Olivia Hayes beyond the hushed whispers in the break room, stories of her uncompromising directives, her swift decisions, her almost inhuman work ethic. He just knew that his job, like so many others, felt suddenly precarious. But his focus remained unwavering. Every polished floor, every gleaming window, every perfectly stacked report on a manager's desk was a testament to his dedication, a silent prayer for stability, a brick in the foundation of Emily's future. He believed in integrity, in kindness, and in the quiet power of simply showing up, day after day, no matter what. He lived by a simple mantra, a phrase he often whispered to himself during the toughest moments, a gentle current of hope in a sea of uncertainty. We'll figure it out, just like we always do. But the world of Ethereum, under Olivia Hayes, was about to collide head-on with David Miller's quiet world, and the collision would echo far beyond the polished halls of the corporation. It would challenge assumptions, shatter preconceptions, and reveal a truth that neither of them expected. The day it all began, the air was thick with the promise of a storm, both outside and within the pristine walls of Ethereum Corporation. For David, the morning had been a frantic scramble. Emily had woken up with a sudden, spiking fever. His heart had pounded in his chest as he made the agonizing call to the school nurse, explaining the situation, arranging for a neighbor to check on her after her medicine kicked in. He'd arrived at Ethereum an hour late for his morning shift as a maintenance assistant, his usual meticulous schedule thrown into disarray. He rushed through the back corridors, his uniform slightly rumpled, a faint sheen of sweat on his brow. The pressure of his late arrival, coupled with the gnawing worry for Emily, made him feel clumsy, off-kilter. He knew Olivia Hayes, the new CEO, was chairing a critical board meeting this morning, a meeting that would finalize her radical restructuring plans. The last thing he needed was to be noticed for the wrong reasons. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As David turned a corner sharply, carrying a bucket of cleaning supplies, his eyes fixed on the clock on the wall, he collided. Not with a person, but with a precarious stack of freshly printed financial reports, left unattended near the door of the main boardroom. The papers exploded into a chaotic white flurry, scattering across the polished marble floor like startled pigeons. Just then, the boardroom door swung open. Olivia Hayes stood there, framed by the gleaming mahogany, her posture rigid, her gaze sharper than any executive's David had ever seen. She was mid-sentence, her voice clear and authoritative, addressing the departing board members. Her eyes, cool and assessing, swept over the scene. David, kneeling amidst the scattered reports, his face flushed with mortification, and the small puddle of coffee he'd inadvertently knocked over from a nearby trolley, now spreading slowly on the pristine floor. A hush fell over the corridor. Lily, an administrative assistant who often gossiped in the break room, and a few other employees paused, watching, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. This was the moment everyone had been warned about, the new CEO's ruthless efficiency colliding with an unfortunate, very human mishap. Olivia's eyes narrowed, fixing on David with an intensity that felt like a physical blow. She didn't raise her voice, but her words, delivered with a chillingly calm precision, cut through the silence like a scalpel. "What exactly is this?" she asked, her voice devoid of any emotion, scanning the scattered reports as if they were a personal affront. "Are you incapable of navigating a hallway without causing a disruption, Mr. Miller?" David scrambled to collect the reports, his hands trembling slightly. I'm so sorry, Miss Hayes. My daughter, she was sick this morning. I was rushing. It won't happen again. I'll clean this immediately." Olivia took a slow step forward, her gaze sweeping over David's slightly disheveled appearance, the slight stain on his uniform he hadn't noticed. She clearly saw an employee who was not only late, but also visibly flustered, an emblem of the very inefficiencies she intended to eradicate. "Your personal life," she stated, her voice chillingly even, "is not a factor in the operational efficiency of Ethereum Corporation. My time, and the time of this company, is too valuable to be wasted on such trivialities." She paused, letting her words hang in the air, waited with unspoken judgment. Then her voice hardened, becoming a low, dangerous growl that resonated with absolute authority. "Look at me again, and you're fired. Is that clear?" David's head snapped up instinctively, his eyes meeting hers for a fleeting, desperate second before he quickly looked down, humiliation burning his cheeks. He could feel the stares of Lily and the other onlookers, their silent judgment almost as heavy as Olivia's words. "Yes, Miss Hayes," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper, resuming his frantic collection of papers. Olivia watched him for a moment longer, her expression unreadable, before she turned on her heel and walked away, her footsteps echoing sharply down the corridor. Her departing words, intended for a senior manager she passed, were cold and dismissive. "Clean this up and review our janitorial services. We need to cut dead weight." The board members dispersed, their murmurs hushed, their eyes occasionally glancing back at David. Lily, observing from a distance, exchanged a look with a colleague, a silent agreement that the new CEO was indeed as formidable as the rumors suggested. David, left alone in the suddenly too quiet hallway, felt a cold knot of dread tighten at his stomach. The threat of dismissal, the public humiliation, it all stung deeply. But worse was the fear of failing Emily. He just wiped the coffee with a rag and continued gathering the reports. He took a deep breath, trying to push away the shame and the rising panic. "We'll figure it out, just like we always do," he whispered to himself, a mantra that felt hollow this time, almost a plea. But he had to. For Emily, he had to. The incident in the hallway set the tone for the coming weeks at Ethereum. Olivia Hayes, true to her word, initiated a ruthless overhaul. Cost-cutting measures sliced through departments like a sharp blade, and efficiency became the new corporate religion. For David and the rest of the janitorial staff, this meant fewer colleagues, longer hours, and more responsibilities, all while the specter of downsizing loomed larger with each passing day. The once bustling night shifts grew quieter, emptier. Olivia, from her opulent corner office, viewed the company through a lens of pure data. Spreadsheets, performance metrics, and quarterly reports were her gospel. She saw David, if she saw him at all, as a line item, an expense, a potential liability. His initial mishaps had cemented her perception of him as a cog prone to jamming, an archetype of the unreliable employee. Her directives trickled down, tightening the screws on everyone, but especially on those at the bottom of the hierarchy. Yet, despite the mounting pressure, David remained steadfast. His hands ached, his feet throbbed, and the worry for Emily was a constant dull thrum beneath his cheerful exterior. Emily's fever had subsided, but her underlying unnamed fragility often manifested in sudden bouts of illness that required his immediate attention, pulling him away from work with little notice. Each time he'd return to Ethereum, ready to make up for lost time, to silently shoulder the extra burden. He refused to complain. To him, complaining was a luxury he couldn't afford. Instead, he worked harder, meticulously ensuring that every corner of the vast corporation gleamed, every waste bin was emptied, every minor repair addressed before it escalated.
He developed an almost encyclopedic knowledge of the building, its quirks and secret passages, its aging infrastructure, the hum of its vast network of pipes and wires. He knew where the old circuit breaker box was hidden in the basement, how to coax the antique freight elevator into service, and which stairwell led directly to the CEO's floor without passing through the main lobby. Sometimes David performed small acts of kindness for his colleagues that went largely unnoticed by management. He'd stay an extra hour to help a nervous new security guard find a misplaced keycard. He'd discreetly fix a wobbly chair in the cafeteria or replace a flickering light bulb in a rarely used stairwell. One evening, he found Lily, the administrative assistant, struggling with a jammed paper shredder, clearly on the verge of tears from exhaustion. David, without a word, took out his small toolkit, tinkered with it for a few minutes, and had it humming again. Lily, grateful, offered him a coffee, but he just smiled and said, "Just doing my job, Lily. We'll figure it out." These small, quiet acts were David's way of pushing back against the cold, impersonal tide of corporate restructuring. He believed that true value wasn't always quantifiable, that integrity and quiet competence were their own rewards.
Meanwhile, Olivia, despite her relentless focus on the macro, began to notice things. Against her will, against her logical, analytical mind, certain anomalies presented themselves. She'd receive reports from facilities management about issues that had been resolved before they were even logged. A minor leak in the executive washroom, a persistent flickering in the server room's lights. Problems that should have required work orders and delayed resolutions were simply gone. Her corner office, which she frequently worked in late into the night, was always immaculately clean, not merely tidy, but truly spotless, with an almost imperceptible gleam on the glass surfaces. She would often attribute it to an anomaly in the data, a temporary spike in maintenance efficiency. "What's the bottom line?" she'd ask her facilities manager, more interested in cost reductions than in the meticulous care being applied. But the quiet consistency nagged at her, a tiny, illogical whisper in the back of her mind. She'd occasionally catch glimpses of a lone figure, a janitor, working silently in the dead of night, his silhouette framed by the stark office lights. It was always him, David Miller. One evening, working late, Olivia's laptop froze mid-report, a critical presentation just hours away. Her frustration mounted. As she wrestled with the unresponsive machine, a soft knock came from her office door. David stood there, holding a dustpan and brush. "Everything all right, Miss Hayes?" he asked, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "My computer just crashed," she snapped, irritation evident in her tone. "It's a critical presentation in the morning." She expected him to apologize for bothering her, to retreat. Instead, David stepped tentatively into the office. "Sometimes," he offered, his eyes scanning the back of her laptop, "the older models, if they're overheating, can seize up. Have you tried a hard reset, Miss Hayes? The power button held down for 10 seconds? Olivia stared at him, surprised by his calm, almost knowledgeable tone. I've tried everything," she scoffed, though she hadn't. She was too used to her tech support team handling such things. "May I?" David asked gently, indicating the laptop. Reluctantly, she pushed the laptop towards him. David, with surprising deftness, held the power button, waited, then pressed it again. The screen flickered to life. He then showed her a simple trick to check background processes that often hogged memory. Within minutes, the laptop was running smoothly again. "Thank you," Olivia said, her voice stiff, a rare, uncharacteristic note of surprise in it. She felt a flicker of something she couldn't quite name, perhaps grudging respect, perhaps annoyance that a janitor had solved her problem so easily. "Of course, Miss Hayes," David replied, his usual humble demeanor returning. "We'll figure it out, just like we always do." He gathered his dustpan and brush, offered a small, polite nod, and retreated into the cavernous building, leaving Olivia to stare at her now working laptop, a tiny crack forming in her hardened, logical facade. The whispers among Lily and the other colleagues shifted. Some still grumbled about the new CEO's harshness, but others, witnessing David's quiet competence and unwavering dedication, began to speak of him with a new respect. They saw him not just as a janitor, but as a silent anchor in a turbulent sea, always there, always reliable, always with a kind word or a helpful hand, despite his own unspoken struggles. But none of them, not even Lily, knew the full extent of David's secret, the profound reason behind his relentless resilience. And that secret was about to come to light in the most dramatic way imaginable. The night before the Ethereum Future Forward Summit was a maelstrom of activity and anxiety. This was Olivia Hayes's moment, the culmination of months of ruthless restructuring. Major investors from around the globe, industry analysts, and the press were descending upon Ethereum's meticulously prepared main auditorium. The new AI-driven operating system, years in development, was to be unveiled, promising to revolutionize global logistics. Everything hinged on this presentation. Olivia, a woman usually unflappable under pressure, felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. She had poured every ounce of her formidable intellect and ambition into this moment. The auditorium was a masterpiece of technology, bathed in a soft, futuristic glow. The screens were colossal, the sound system impeccable. Then it happened. A sudden, jarring power fluctuation, caused by the ferocious storm raging outside, swept through the building. The colossal screens flickered violently, then died, plunging the stage into an eerie semi-darkness. A collective gasp, then murmurs of panic rippled through the assembled Ethereum team. A critical server rack, humming with the heart of the new AI system, let out a distressed screech before falling silent. The main presentation software crashed, irreparably, just 30 minutes before the doors were due to open. Chaos erupted. Technicians scrambled, shouting into phones, their faces etched with horror. Olivia, witnessing her meticulously constructed empire teeter on the brink, felt a cold wave of despair wash over her. Her face, usually so composed, was pale, her eyes wide with a rare, devastating vulnerability. "What's the bottom line?" she demanded, her voice rising. But there was no bottom line here, only disaster. "It's a cascading power surge, Miss Hayes," one frantic technician yelled. "The primary server connection is fried. We need hours, maybe even a full day to bypass it." The investors were already arriving. The clock was ticking. Her ambition, her reputation, the entire future of Ethereum hung by a thread. Suddenly, a calm, familiar voice cut through the pandemonium. "The secondary power conduit in sublevel B, Miss Hayes. It connects directly to the presentation hall's independent grid. It's an old failsafe, rarely used, but it's isolated from the main surge." Everyone turned. It was David Miller, still in his janitor's uniform, holding a worn toolbox. He looked tired, his eyes a little red, but his voice was steady, unwavering. He had been called in for an emergency late-night cleanup after a catering spill in the VIP lounge, only to find himself in the midst of this disaster. Olivia stared at him, incredulous. "How do you know that, Miller? No one even remembered that conduit existed." "The original blueprints," David replied, already moving towards a service panel. "This building, it has a very clever, if complex, infrastructure." He began to work with astonishing speed and precision, his hands moving with the confident familiarity of a seasoned engineer, not a janitor. He didn't just understand the layout, he understood the system. He started rerouting cables, bypassing fried circuits, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. "We need to get to sublevel B," he instructed the bewildered technicians, his voice now firm, authoritative. "Someone needs to manually reset the old circuit breakers down there. It's a tricky sequence. If you don't do it right, you could fry the entire auxiliary grid." One of the senior technicians, a man named Mark, looked at David, then at Olivia. "He's right, Miss Hayes, but who knows the sequence?" David didn't hesitate. "I do. I mapped it out when I was cataloging the electrical schematics." He pulled a crumpled, hand-drawn diagram from his pocket. "Mark, you follow these steps precisely. I'll handle the connections up here." As David worked, his movements swift and sure, a small, laminated ID card slipped from his pocket and fell to the floor near Olivia's feet. Olivia, numb with shock and awe at his unexpected competence, bent to pick it up. It wasn't an Ethereum janitor ID. It was an old, faded ID card from a prestigious architectural firm, with a younger, sharper-looking David Miller smiling confidently, his title emblazoned beneath his name, Chief Structural Engineer. At that very moment, David's phone, which he'd propped up on his toolbox, buzzed with an incoming video call. It was Emily. He briefly glanced at it, his face softening with a profound tenderness, then quickly silenced it, tucking it away. But not before Olivia, standing inches away, caught a glimpse of Emily's pale, sweet face on the screen, and overheard a fragment of his whispered assurance before he silenced it. "Daddy's busy, sweetheart, but you'll be okay. We'll figure it out, just like we always do." The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in Olivia's mind with brutal clarity. The engineering ID, the detailed knowledge of the building's complex systems, the quiet competence, the constant worry for his daughter. David Miller wasn't just a janitor. He was a highly skilled professional, a man of immense talent, hiding in plain sight, making immense personal sacrifices, probably for Emily's health, quietly battling his own demons, while she, Olivia Hayes, had publicly humiliated him, dismissed him as dead weight. The phrase, "Look at me again and you're fired," echoed in her ears, now laden with a crushing weight of shame and regret. She hadn't seen him at all. With a triumphant hum, the screens on stage flared to life, bright and powerful. The server racks began their familiar thrumming. David, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow, gave a tired but satisfied nod. "It's stable, Miss Hayes. The auxiliary system is online. You have 30 minutes. The silence that followed was different now.
It wasn't the silence of panic, but of profound shock and dawning respect. Lily and the other colleagues who had been witnessing the entire frantic scene exchanged wide-eyed glances. Their initial judgments, their silent criticisms, evaporated in the face of this extraordinary revelation. "I can't believe what I just saw," Lily whispered, her voice filled with genuine awe, not gossip. Olivia stood rooted to the spot, the old ID card still clutched in her hand. Her meticulously constructed world of facts and figures had just been shattered, replaced by the undeniable, raw truth of human resilience, integrity, and sacrifice. She looked at David Miller, not as a janitor, not as an inefficiency, but as a man of immense value, a silent hero. And for the first time in a long time, Olivia Hayes felt something beyond ambition and logic. She felt a profound, humbling empathy. The Ethereum Future Forward Summit was a resounding success. The new AI system was unveiled without a hitch, the presentation flawless, earning Olivia Hayes the thunderous applause and accolades she had so relentlessly pursued. But as she stood on stage, accepting the praise, her eyes kept drifting to the back of the auditorium, where David Miller, still in his humble uniform, was quietly collecting a stray piece of confetti, his expression serene. The true victory, she realized, wasn't in the profit margins or the stock prices, but in the quiet courage of a man she had so carelessly undervalued. The moment the last investor had departed and the final lights of the auditorium dimmed, Olivia found David in a quiet corner, meticulously coiling an audio cable. She approached him, the laminated ID card from his past still warm in her palm. "David," she began, her voice softer than he had ever heard it, tinged with a humility that was utterly alien to her usual tone. "We need to talk."
David straightened, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. He expected a reprimand, perhaps even his dismissal for having overstepped. Olivia extended the ID card. "Chief Structural Engineer," she read aloud, her gaze meeting his, "at Stonebridge Holdings. You were one of the best, weren't you? What happened?" David sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. It was time. "My wife," he began, his voice hushed. "She passed away 3 years ago, a rare autoimmune disease. We poured everything into her treatment, every penny, every insurance claim. It wasn't enough." His voice caught, but he pushed through. "When she was gone, I had nothing left but Emily, and a mountain of medical debt. Stonebridge was cutting staff, and I couldn't focus. I needed a job with flexible hours, something that allowed me to be there for Emily, especially with her own health challenges." He paused, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "This building, Ethereum, it was the last major project I consulted on before everything changed. I knew its bones, its secrets. It felt familiar, and the night shift allowed me to be with Emily during the day." Olivia listened, her analytical mind processing the data, but her heart feeling a profound, painful ache. She had judged him based on a spilled coffee and a hurried appearance, blind to the colossal sacrifice and silent grief that fueled his every action. The sheer, quiet strength of this man, who could have been her peer, choosing to mop floors to care for his child, was overwhelming. "David," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I owe you an apology, a profound one. I saw you as an inefficiency. I dismissed your worth. I humiliated you. And you saved my most important project with the very skills I failed to see. You embody everything I claim Ethereum stands for: resilience, ingenuity, dedication." She took a deep breath. "The company you were at, Stonebridge, they're in the process of a major merger. They need experienced engineers to oversee the transition. I made a call. And Ethereum," she continued, her eyes alight with a new kind of vision, "we need more than just spreadsheets. We need heart. We need people like you. I'm offering you a position as head of facilities and infrastructure development. It's not just about maintenance, David. It's about optimizing, about innovating, about leading a team with true integrity. And," she added, her voice softening, "we have an excellent health benefits package for you and for Emily." David stood there, stunned. Tears welled in his eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude. It was more than he had ever dared to hope for. "Miss Hayes," he began, his voice cracking slightly, I don't know what to say." Olivia smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed her usually severe features. "Say yes, David, and perhaps teach me a thing or two about the real bottom line." A few weeks later, the whispers among Lily and the other Ethereum employees had shifted dramatically. David Miller, the humble janitor, was now David Miller,
the respected head of facilities, his quiet authority and genuine kindness winning over everyone. Lily often saw him smiling, sometimes talking animatedly on the phone, undoubtedly to Emily. "I can't believe what I just saw," she'd often say, not with gossip, but with genuine wonder at the incredible turnaround. Olivia Hayes, too, was a changed leader. Her efficiency remained, but it was now tempered with a newfound empathy. She implemented policies that supported employees facing personal hardship, understanding that human value was far more complex than a mere number on a balance sheet. She learned that true leadership wasn't about cutting dead weight, but about recognizing and nurturing the often hidden potential and unwavering spirit within every individual.
David, still soft-spoken and humble, now moved through the halls with a renewed sense of purpose. He still whispered his mantra, but now it was filled with a profound sense of shared humanity. We'll figure it out, just like we always do. Because sometimes the most extraordinary strengths are found in the quietest corners, and the greatest lessons are learned when we dare to look beyond the surface, beyond the labels, and truly see each other. The true value, the real integrity, the deepest compassion, it was always there, waiting to be revealed. And sometimes it just took a single father's quiet sacrifice to make even the most ambitious CEO see the light.